Deep in Wyoming's untamed wilderness, high among the granite peaks and towering pines, late summer of 1878 brought an unexpected dawn. Robert Boone, a battle-weary veteran of America's bloodiest conflict, had chosen isolation over society, turning his back on the world he'd once fought to preserve. Tragedy had claimed his beloved wife and precious child in senseless violence years before, leaving him to carry their spirits not as open wounds, but as haunting whispers that accompanied his every solitary moment. He'd made his home in a forgotten military outpost nestled among the evergreens and stone, seeking refuge from both humanity and his own consuming remorse. As morning light crept across the mountainside, Robert stirred to an unusual shadow cast against his cabin's roofline, motionless. In the gathering dawn, stepping into the crisp air, pine needles crackling beneath weathered boots, his eyes found her. A fair-haired woman suspended lifeless from the roof beam, her feet swaying gently, golden strands brushing against charred letters burned deep into the wooden door. Apache lover stared back at him in blackened accusation, his gut twisted as he drew near, pulse hammering, while darkness still clung to the western sky. The acrid stench of scorched wood filled his nostrils, harsh and condemning. His hand instinctively sought the pistol beneath his coat, only to discover that killing no longer came naturally. Death had lost its appeal as his simplest solution. Drawing closer, he detected the gentle rise and fall of her chest, labored and irregular, but unmistakably present. Life flickered within her battered form. Her complexion was ghostly pale, face streaked with grime and crusted blood, lids sealed shut. Each breath came shallow but persistent. Disbelief washed over Robert like a cold mountain stream. Supporting her weight carefully, he felt her fragile frame collapse into his strength, delicate as a wounded sparrow. With deliberate gentleness, he lifted her across his shoulders, muscles protesting against this unfamiliar act of compassion. As they descended the slope beyond his dwelling, the very air seemed to transform. The woodland held its silence until suddenly, crack, gunshots shattered the stillness, echoing in rapid succession through the pine forest. The sounds were far off yet urgent, clearly menacing. Someone expected her death. Someone had witnessed her plight, possibly orchestrated her hunt. That Robert's grip tightened on the unconscious woman, her heartbeat fluttering against his spine. Without hesitation, he pressed forward. His boots slipped on loose gravel, branches snagged his clothing. As he rushed toward the makeshift shelter he'd constructed beside a concealed creek. Sanctuary lay mere minutes ahead, yet each stride felt like a choice between redemption and pursuing vengeance. Reaching the clearing's border, with jagged pines at his back and crude refuge ahead, he dared believe no tracker had followed. Gently, he lowered her onto a bed of animal pelts and woolen blankets reserved for dire circumstances. Her tangled golden hair spread across the furs like captured sunbeams. Kneeling, he tilted her chin upward. Her lashes trembled slightly. Her breathing deepened, a single, shuddering intake. Only then did he realize he'd been holding his own breath in the hushed atmosphere. Nothing existed except her ragged respirations and distant echoes of terror beyond the trailing. He remained there in the morning glow, listening to each breath, as though witnessing a sacred secret meant only for him. Questions about what lay ahead, who had inflicted this suffering, and why. None of that mattered yet. What mattered was her survival, and his unwavering determination that death would not claim her here. Not through rope or fire or revenge. Outside, the forest seemed to pulse with renewed vitality, pine boughs whispering overhead, the far-off gunfire now silent, and Robert listened intently, heart racing as he waited for consciousness to return to her eyes. Fever consumed her for 2 full days. Robert tended her wounds, cleansed her injuries, cooled her burning forehead with spring water drawn from behind the cabin, binding her limbs with cloth torn from his own shirts. She stirred only once, murmuring a single name like a snapped string, caught in the breeze, Tuha Hammer. The sound haunted the quiet on the second night. As the fire crackled low, she jolted awake in terror. Her arms thrashed wildly, breathing turned sharp and desperate. She screamed, clawing at her throat, grasping for invisible restraints. "Stay back. Release me. I'd rather die than return to that place." Robert moved swiftly, capturing her wrists, not roughly, but with firm control. She fought fiercely, jaw clenched, legs striking out. "You're protected now," he said with quiet authority. "That place can't reach you anymore." Her eyes darted frantically, filled with raw fear. She lunged toward the fireplace, reaching for the wood-splitting blade. He caught her around the waist, pulling her firmly against his chest. "Don't," he said, voice low and steady. "Not like this. Not after surviving this much." Her body shook, breath coming in broken gasps. For a moment, she sagged in his embrace like someone who'd run beyond exhaustion only to discover miles still remained. His hold loosened gradually. She turned slowly, voice fractured and cautious. "Who are you?" "Robert's my name," he replied. "Boone. This shelter belongs to me. What remains of it anyway? You were the one I discovered." He nodded confirmation. Her gaze dropped. She settled on the floor, legs tucked beneath her, arms wrapped protectively around herself like a child seeking comfort. After prolonged silence, she whispered, "I'm called Annabeth. Annabeth Crowley." Robert went rigid. Crowley. The name struck him like a musket ball to the chest. Years had passed since he'd heard it, but once it had been inscribed on military orders directing mercenaries into Apache territories, orders bearing Nathaniel Crowley's signature, plantation owner, cattle baron, and self-appointed border purifier. "He," Anna continued, unaware of Robert's shifting expression, "is my father." Or was. Robert remained silent. "I fled years ago after he struck me for the final time." Her voice tightened. "But I didn't just run away. I followed someone who saved me when I lay bleeding in the creek behind our property. He told me I wasn't his enemy, said no one is born one." "You loved him," Robert said gently. She nodded. "We made our home in the canyons, far from civilization. I learned his language, wore his mother's sacred beads, slept beneath star-filled skies." A tear traced down her cheek. "They hunted us last winter. White men, some familiar faces, others my father had hired. They ambushed our camp." She shook her head as if denying the memory could erase it. "Tuha fell defending me. I watched him die. No scream escaped me. I couldn't make a sound." "They captured you," Robert observed. She raised her sleeve, revealing faded bruises and permanent burns. "They called me witch, whore, Apache lover. Said I disgraced my bloodline. They bound me, dragged me between settlements, then left me hanging as a warning, ensuring no girl would dare love someone like him again." Her voice shattered. Robert studied her, jaw clenched tight. The fire hissed softly. His hands had formed fists before conscious thought. Her tale awakened something ancient and bitter. Memories of campfires burning too close to smoke and blood, of children crying in languages no one bothered to comprehend. Anna fell quiet, eyes heavy with exhaustion and shame. "You're free to despise me," she whispered. "Everyone else does." Robert settled beside her on the floor, gazing into the flames. His voice emerged as barely a breath. "I don't despise you." She turned toward him slowly. "Do you believe I betrayed my own people?" "No," he said. "I believe those making such claims never understood what genuine love looks like." She blinked, lip quivering. "I should have perished with him." Robert reached for the fire poker, stirring the embers, and whispered without meeting her gaze. "You didn't, and that's not betrayal, that's survival. Only cowards fear souls brave enough to love beyond boundaries." Anna buried her face in her hands, and for the first time since her world burned, she wept without shame. That night the fire dimmed, casting long, dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Robert sat outside beneath moonlight, an untouched cup of black coffee growing cold in his palms. His eyes stared into the woods, but he wasn't seeing trees or constellations. He was seeing flames point 15 years prior. Fire had danced higher than village rooftops. Screams had drowned out rifle cracks. Robert had stood at the edge of a burning Apache settlement. One his unit had orders to leave unharmed, but orders hadn't mattered. Not to the men carrying torches, not to those intoxicated by hatred and bloodlust. The village had been allied, peaceful, mostly women and children, but their proximity to the Crowley ranch and whispers of intermingling had brought the flames anyway. He'd returned once the dust settled, searching for survivors. Instead, he'd found his wife collapsed by the riverbank, struck by a stray bullet, his daughter lifeless beside her, caught in the chaos. They'd been visiting, bringing food to a midwife. Friend. Wrong location, wrong timing, wrong appearance perhaps. No one ever provided answers. The man who'd led that purge, who'd signed the maps and designated targets, had been Clayton Radique, the same fanatic who'd declared that mixed bloods and sympathizers required cleansing, whose hatred needed no justification beyond a match and motivation. Robert had buried his family with his own hands, then vanished into the mountains, vowing never to raise a weapon again, never to choose sides, never again to participate in any conflict. Until now. Inside the cabin, Annabeth slept restlessly, curled in the far corner, wrapped in wool and silence. Her fever had broken, but nightmares persisted. That morning, she discovered his old rifle beneath the floorboards, bringing it to him with confusion and cold eyes. "This belongs to you." He nodded. "The trigger's missing." He'd removed it the day he'd buried his daughter, leaving the metal interred beside her, a vow no bullet could rewrite. "I don't shoot anymore," he'd said that she'd stared at him. "Not even if they come back for me." He'd said nothing. She hadn't argued, just handed him the useless rifle and walked away, shoulders bearing the weight of battles she wasn't ready to fight. That afternoon, Robert began reconstructing an old shelter deeper in the forest, a half-ruined hunter's hut he'd abandoned long ago. He repaired the roof, cleared the overgrowth, replaced the shattered door. He laid fresh blankets, rebuilt the fire pit with bare hands, not because she'd asked, but because it offered her space and dignity. When she discovered it the following morning, she stood silently in the doorway, staring at the small vegetable patch he'd started. Rows of potato shoots, sprigs of thyme, wild onions. Healing wouldn't come quickly, but it would come. Anna turned to him, eyes wide and glistening. "You built this for me." He nodded once. "I never asked." "You didn't need to." For a long moment, she remained speechless. Then she stepped into the hut, sat on the edge of the bedding, and stared at the soil outside as if it held the bones of her past. He watched her shoulders tremble. Then soundlessly and slowly, she began crying. Not the wild sobs of grief, but the aching, quiet release of someone who hadn't allowed herself to weep since death first knocked. Robert didn't speak or move closer. He let her be, understanding this wasn't about rescue. It was about surviving together while remaining alone when necessary. The forest whispered around them. For the first time in years, the man who believed he had nothing left to give offered something more enduring than bullets. He gave her shelter, peace, and in return, she gave him the first tears of trust. The wind carried more than pine needles that morning. It carried voices. Low, distant, angry. Rumors spread quickly through towns like dust water, but lies traveled faster, and by noon they reached men who'd always sought excuses to cleanse the land with blood. Apache lovers still breathing. Clayton Radique sat in a smoky saloon 2 towns south, boots propped on the table, bottle in hand when the whisper reached him. A rider from the foothills had seen something. A flash of blonde hair near the old station, a stranger moving through the woods. Radique rose slowly, hand twitching near the old revolver at his belt. "You certain?" The rider nodded. "Mountain man's. Hiding her. One of your former boys spotted the tracks. Woman's prints, small, recent." Radique's grin carried old hatred. "She's a ghost we should have burned the first time. Let's finish this properly." By nightfall, he had 6 riders saddled. No badges, just men who despised silence and mixed bloodlines. Meanwhile, in the hills, a knock sounded at Robert's door. He opened it, hand positioned behind the frame. A local trader stood nervously on the step, hat in hand. "I don't want trouble, Boone," he said. "But you should know, there's a bounty, a quiet one, posted in coin and cattle. Apache lover's head brings it in real clean." Robert said nothing. The trader looked down, ashamed. "I seen you once with her near the creek. Just figured you ought to know what's coming." He departed as quickly as he'd arrived. Inside the cabin, Annabeth heard every word. She packed her bag before Robert could speak, hands trembling but voice steady. "I have to leave. They'll kill you if they find me here. They'll kill you if you go." She looked at him, eyes hardening. "You saved me once. I'm not asking you to do it twice." Robert took a breath, stepped forward. "I lost a wife and child because I followed orders. I stood idle when I should have spoken, watched fire consume everything, and called it fate. I won't repeat that mistake." She opened her mouth, but he wasn't finished. You're not baggage or burden. You're a human being. I'm done pretending the world gets to decide which ones deserve protection. Her shoulders dropped, but her gaze remained firm. They'll come. I know, he said. That night, Robert ventured into the woods alone, moving like a shadow, quiet, calculated, unseen. He hadn't touched weapons in years, but survival skills remained. Sharp. He set traps not to kill, but to delay. Alarm wires made from old tins and broken glass, tripped branches along the ridge, a silent perimeter of warnings, not violence. When he returned, dawn was beginning to bruise the sky. Anna waited by the fire, fingers wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. You could have run, she said quietly. I could have, he replied. Why didn't you? He looked at her for a long time. Because I've watched men fight to possess, to own, to chain. That's not why I'm here. Then why? He placed his hand gently on the table between them, not touching her, just close. I simply want you to live. She couldn't speak, throat tightening too quickly for words. No one had ever said that to her before, not even Tua. People had wanted her silent, loyal, useful, beautiful. No one had simply wanted her breathing. In that moment, for the first time in her life, Anna Crowley didn't feel like someone fleeing. She felt seen. Behind them, the woods remained still, but beyond the ridges, hoofbeats had begun, quiet yet growing. The war wasn't finished, but neither were they. The wind shifted after sundown. Robert felt it first, not in the trees, but in his gut, a tight pull, the quiet before something sharp. He rose from the cot and checked the traps. 3 were sprung. No sound, no warning, but someone had passed through carefully, deliberately. He returned to the cabin and opened the door without words. Anna looked up from the fire, eyes wide. They're here, she asked. Robert nodded once. Stay inside. No lights, no sound. She stood. I can help. I need you alive more than I need help. Then he was gone, melting into the woods like a shadow sliding between branches. 3 men moved through the forest with hunting knives and rope. One bore a scar down his cheek, another walked with a limp. The third carried kerosene in one hand and a noose in the other. Robert took high ground, crouched among pine roots, watching. The men whispered as they crept toward the rebuilt shelter, laughing low. Bet she's pretty when she begs. Better if she's half dead. Easier to string. Robert moved quickly, dropping behind the last one, striking hard. Elbow to throat, blade to wrist, just enough to render him unconscious. The second turned, catching a punch full in the jaw before raising his weapon. But the third spotted movement and shouted, drawing a revolver. Gunfire cracked through the trees. The cabin. Annabeth heard it. She froze, then grabbed the oil lantern, flint, and one desperate idea. Outside, Robert fought like a man who despised violence but understood it too well. He dodged, rolled, kicked, but they were faster now. 2 against 1, blades flashing. Then came light. Not from the moon, from the trees. Flames roared up the dry underbrush in a sudden bloom of gold. The fire Anna started leaped from bush to branch, devouring everything in its path. Heat poured over the forest like breath from hell itself. The attackers turned, shouting, blinded by smoke. Robert used the moment, striking fast, breaking one's leg, dragging the other into the dirt before fleeing. He ran toward the glow, toward danger, because that's where she was. Anna stood near the ridge base, dress singed, hair damp with sweat, holding a burning stick like a sword. She coughed once, eyes searching. When Robert reached her, he didn't speak, just grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the ravine trail. They ran together, half choking, half burning, until reaching the mouth of an old cave nestled deep in the canyon wall, a place Robert had used during winter patrols. Inside, the air was cool, safe, barely. Robert collapsed first, then pulled her down beside him. They lay there in darkness, breath heavy, skin marked with soot and ash. She winced as he gently brushed hair from her face. A long lock had burned at the ends, singed into brittle curl. You set the woods on fire, he said, almost smiling. Just a little, she rasped. You could have died. She met his gaze. I know. He paused, fingers still tangled in the remains of her hair. Would you have died for me? Anna swallowed, the question cracking something open. No, she whispered. I want to live for you. The cave fell silent except for their breath and distant pop of burning pine. But inside them, something deeper had caught fire, and this one they wouldn't run from. Dustwater was the kind of town where shadows moved faster than gossip. Robert hadn't walked its streets in years. Not since the war, not since smoke and screams. But now he stood in the back of a crowded trading post, face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat, listening. Clayton Radix, coming by week's end. One man said over barrels of sugar and dried beans. Got business with the mayor, or maybe something more personal. Personal like bounty hunting. Another muttered. Robert stiffened, turned, and walked. Out, the bell tinkling behind him. Down the hill at town's edge, Anna waited in a borrowed wagon. Her hood was drawn low, but her eyes scanned every rider, every glint of silver on a belt. When Robert approached, she spoke without looking. Did you hear his name? Yes. Then it's him. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the scorched piece of tanned leather, half burned, blackened at the corners. It had been nailed to the old signal post door when Robert found.